Hello, my name is Will Hollingsworth. I'm here today with
Jonathan Floyd
and
Beverly Nissel.
And this is
Wake Up Ravenna!
All right, this is episode 3. So we're here talking with Beverly today because she wants to talk to us a little bit about some preservational stuff and some historical stuff here in Portage County that has to do with cemeteries. So I'm going to let you start us off. Explain to me what it is you're most concerned about right now, because we were talking about the headstones and everything else. So go ahead and give me that spiel.
Okay, so I'm a cemetery preservationist, and what is of major concern to me is the condition our cemeteries are in. You know, some are in really bad shape. They're falling apart. We have veterans with no graves. Because of the recent infirmary project, we now have people that the infirmary records say went back to their townships to be buried, but we're not finding them buried in those cemeteries. And that's a huge problem. We have cemeteries that have never been numbered when the Department of Commerce numbered them. So we have cemeteries that are disappearing because of the laws that are not in place to protect them.
Okay. So what, so tell me then, so let's go back to the questions we came up with the other day. So let's start with, it was a sexton?
The person who takes care of a cemetery is called a sexton. There should be one in every township, and then the cities usually have something similar to that. In the townships, the sexton, that is not his only job, because the state of Ohio actually defines the care that a cemetery in a township gets. So like they get the grass mowed once a month, they get the roads in and out of the cemetery kept clear. You know, if there is a broken stone or monument that is a safety hazard, then it's up to them to make sure that's repaired so the cemetery is a safe place to go. There are several that are in worse shape than others. It's pretty much, I'm going to tag it as lack of education, because in Ohio, we have an Ohio Township Association, and there's really not a lot of education for the people who become sextons. So we have cemeteries that don't understand that when they use weed killer around a stone, that the salt and the chemicals in the weed killer damage the stone. And it causes the grass around it to die in a zone we call the zone of death. And once the grass is dead, the rhizomes underneath it are not there to support that stone, so they start sinking into the ground.
Right. Do you want to bring anything up?
Well, what do we have here?
Well, it sounds like, so what we're talking about is how cemeteries are being allowed to start to sort of crumble as they're not being upkept very well. What do you think about that, Jonathan?
Well, I think what you're saying is true. I have a question for Debbie. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Do you see dead people?
Do I see dead people? You know, in the cemetery where I grew up, and it's a very nicely kept cemetery. I grew up in Edinburg Township. I see everybody I ever loved in that cemetery. Because as I walk back through there, I will see this person, and that'll be the person who drove me to school on the bus. Or I will see this person who was in 4-H with me. Or I will see my nephew who was a ranger in Iraq and got killed in Iraq, and his marker's there. So when I walk through a cemetery, I see the history of my township and all the people who came before me. But I also see people I knew, people that are older than me, you know, and you learn things about people that I'm not sure they always want to share. You know, when you walk through a cemetery, you're experiencing probably the worst part of their lives. So you'll walk past a stone that belongs to somebody you know, and there will be a couple stones beside it that may be children that died, you know, at the beginning of their lives before you were even born or knew them, and you didn't know that about them. So do I see dead people? Every day, and I love it there.
So you have a lot of personal connection then, obviously, to the cemetery, because you have so many people you know that are buried there.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, I only have one relative in the Edinburg Cemetery. My family is, we moved to the country from Akron. So, most of my relatives are in the Talmadge Cemetery.
Oh, I know that cemetery. I grew up there, so
It's a nice
over by
cemetery.
the old library.
Over by the
Yep.
old library.
Which, and quick aside, was obviously as a child was very scary to go to the library and be like, "There's a cemetery right there," and you're like, "Ghosts."
The cemetery was never some place I was ever afraid of. And they do cemetery walks in the fall. I know at Maple Grove, Kevin Gray does a cemetery walk. We have not done one, but we're thinking about it. But there's a really good one in Twinsburg where they dress up in period costume and they act like the people who are buried.
Oh, okay.
So, like in Twinsburg, there was a doctor and his wife. They were both doctors. And at the time, it was really out of place for a woman to be educated. But they talked about their kids and things that had happened in their lives.
What? So just building off of that, then what? Because I've never been on a cemetery walk, although I would like to take Kevin up on one because I think that would be fun.
He does good ones.
I imagine he does. I've watched some of his presentations. He's knowledgeable man. What do you do on a cemetery? Obviously, I know you're walking around. I'm assuming you're looking at historical people going, oh, here's who's buried here, who's buried there.
You tell their story because, believe it or not, every monument tells their story. I can tell you that the cemetery in Edinburg became a cemetery because a gentleman's daughter died. And this was back in the in the 1800s. And his best friend, there was no cemetery. And his best friend donated the land that became the cemetery. And, in Portage County, we have some family cemeteries. Some are on private property, and getting to them is difficult. We have a Revolutionary War soldier on Industry Road, and that was at one time a family cemetery. Now, the military marker's still there, but his family markers aren't because over time they disappeared. And there was a time when the Commerce Department came out and numbered cemeteries that existed so they could keep track of them. But there were a lot that didn't get numbered. And because laws don't protect them forever, then, people move the stones and do other things with the land.
So every year, in Halloween, trick-or-treating is downtown Ravenna.
Yeah.
The downtown Ravenna businesses. But my question is, the Ravenna Chamber of Commerce, I was thinking, this is just an idea. How would it feel if you can do a Halloween walk with the cemeteries?
Okay,
Well, a cemetery, it has walks, but you have to remember that everybody's beliefs about death and dying are very different. Like in some cultures, people get buried within 3 days of their death. Their bodies are not embalmed. That is their culture. There are cultures that embalm the body, put them in a metal casket, put that casket in a crypt that goes into the ground. There are some people that get cremated and they go in crematorium devices that are in the cemeteries. And not every cemetery in Portage County offers that for a cemetery. It's pretty much based on whatever the township has a need for. So some do and some don't.
Like clues we can put in.
Well, they do now. That they do, Jonathan. Yes. They do scavenger hunts in cemeteries, but it's based on what you find on a cemetery stone. So you may go into Maple Grove, and the first part of the scavenger hunt would be find such and such, and there may actually be a stone where someone had, a car engraved in their stone to decorate their stone, or a certain military rank. You could go look for that. So a lot of places will do scavenger hunts in cemeteries. But I think to have a Halloween walk might upset people because Halloween is not, there are Christian faiths that don't celebrate Halloween. Yes. But I think that would probably be, just a little too much. just an idea. I know, and that's fine.
But I like that idea though of like the scavenger hunt and like doing things like that as a historical, because I mean, like you said, like the Civil War, to find the Civil War headstone and like maybe find out more about who that was and what their family was like, and like, what regiment did they serve in, what battles were they in, like how did they pass, even stuff like that. I think that's a very interesting way of like exploring history through, because we obviously, as people pass away, we know that historically they're dead or whatever, but like to then be there physically knowing this is their remains, this is their headstone, kind of makes their story feel real,
It does. It makes history come alive for a lot of people, whether it's the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and it's also remarkable to look at families that have never served their country and families where every member served their country. So, that's a personal choice. Everybody should get to make it. But it's also cool for kids to go to a cemetery and not be afraid, but to be able to take that part of history and work it into their lives. So just like we talked earlier, and we were talking about the Kennedy assassination, we all said where we were. So if somebody said, your grandfather was alive when Franklin Roosevelt was president, then all of a sudden you put your grandfather mentally in that era. So you're thinking, oh, well, did he dress like him? Did he do other things like him? Did they have cars? And you start bringing that history alive.
Yes. Could that be a good thing in downtown Ravenna?
It's always a good thing. It would be really cool in downtown Ravenna to not necessarily have a cemetery walk, but the day that Ravenna was founded, have a Founders Day and let everybody dress up the way people dressed and acted when Ravenna was founded.
Which was 1790 something, 99?
1799.
99? That would be colonial wear. That would be so interesting to do.
See, 1799, when the county was formed, right? We have our 250th anniversary.
That's right.
1776. Yep.
You talk about, right?
Well, we're having the 250th anniversary of our country this year. And I know there's going to be a big picnic downtown to celebrate that.
So actually, that's a really quick question then, speaking of that, because you did mention, are there any Revolutionary War veterans who are buried here in like Portage County or
There
Ravenna?
are Revolutionary War veterans in Portage County. It is a hotly contested number because some you can't find or prove that they died here or there. I know that we have one that is, one township claims he was buried there, but the infirmary records say he died and was up there. So, that's always a point of contention. I know that at one point in time they said that there were 80, but there was a newspaper article by the Ohio Genealogical Society in the 70s that gives Portage County 170-some Revolutionary War veterans.
Really?
Now, they didn't all live here during the Revolutionary War, but as they got land for fighting in the Revolutionary War, that westward expansion drew them out of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and they came this way.
Well,
some would stop, like the guy who gave the land for the little girl to be buried in Edinburg died in California.
Oh, wow.
And back then, when you're on a horse, that is a long way to go.
Right, they're not going to ship you back.
No,
they couldn't.
No airplanes.
My next question is that back then things were different
Absolutely.
when you were growing up.
Because that was what I was going to say too, though. Speak off of what he said is that back then, like I'm thinking about, because you're right, that westward expansion, because we were still 13 colonies, so Ohio was the West. Like we think
were
of
the
it
West.
Now. We're the Mideast now, but like we were the West at one point. So it's like we were the frontier.
Yes, it's called How the West Won.
How the West was won.
Yes.
And it would have been like that here. I mean, we had native tribes, indigenous people that I know that out at West Branch there are places where, they had burial mounds and they lived in this area before we got here.
Yes.
Actually, that's a good segue and just into a question, because obviously I know that I've been to some of the burial mounds here in Northeast Ohio, and I know that they're protected under historical preservation rules and such. How does that apply to then like more traditional cemeteries that we have? Are they related or are they different?
Traditional cemeteries that are licensed cemeteries are protected.
Okay.
It is a felony to go in, and you know how some kids who aren't so great go in and knock over stones, spray paint, they trash a cemetery. That's a crime. And the sheriff will come get you and take you to his little house out on Infirmary Road and give you a room to stay in. Kind of infringes on your privacy, but if that's how the way you're going to be, then you get what happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that does happen. There are crazy things that happen in cemeteries, and most of it involves families and I would say less than really good communication skills. It's not uncommon for a first wife and a second wife to argue and to be upset. Like the first wife may be the mother of the children, the second wife may have spent the last 30 years with them, and they get into an argument over
who gets the burial plot.
Well, who gets to say what the headstone looks like. And literally in some sections can tell you some very wild stories. It's not uncommon for them to get to the point to where they don't put a stone on it for a long time. And one will bring a marker of sorts to put there, and then when the other one comes, they take that one off and put theirs on. So it takes, it can be bad. I guess when I look at cemeteries, for me, we have John Does, people who get killed that are buried in the cemeteries. For me, it's really rough to see a person that is in an unmarked grave. And, they could have been poor, they could have been passing through, there's any number of reasons that could happen, but nobody thought enough about them to put a marker.
I see. How many credits do we have?
Oh, we're off the dome on this one.
We're off the dome.
Yeah, we're just talking about cemeteries. If you got any, you can bring them up.
What are the questions that we have on?
Oh, I don't have them in front of me. Is what I'm saying. We're just talking right now.
That's good.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to bring up about cemeteries still?
Cemeteries. It's a good thing, right?
Believe it or not, Jonathan, 75% of people, I think it's 73% of people are now being cremated. So some of those never make it to a cemetery. So as a genealogical researcher, you pretty much could always go back and find where someone was buried.
Yes.
And that would provide you with information. And you would see an obituary in the paper. But we don't see obituaries all the time anymore because they are like $3 or $4 a word. And that's a lot for families that don't always have that ability. Say they got killed in an accident, there'll be an article about, the accident and how they died. But an obituary gives you a lot of clues to your family's past, like where they worked, your aunts and uncles, your brothers and sisters. I mean, you've lost people. You know what goes in an obituary. And
yes, I do.
It tells you a lot about your family. Unfortunately, because of crime in some areas, when they write an obituary, they don't list last names. So they used to tell the cities. They don't do that anymore because you can look up. If you had somebody's first and last name, you could find where their house was. And Jonathan, if you were a bad guy, there are people who literally go and rob these people's houses. Like, oh man, that guy lives in Hudson. That's a nice neighborhood. Well, they're going to be at that funeral. It's probably a good time although we have cameras now and things have changed even further, but still, there was a time when you would not have left your house unattended because of that.
Okay. What was it like back then when you were growing up?
When I was growing up? Are you referring to my hair, Jonathan?
No.
I grew up in the 60s.
That's good.
Yeah, it was the 60s. I mean,
What was it like back then in the 60s? Okay. My next question that goes, what's it like now?
The difference between the 60s and now?
Yes.
In cemeteries or just in life?
Both.
Well, in cemeteries, they now make cemetery stones that have solar lights between the panels. So when you used to go to the bank drive-through, that real thick glass, they put two pieces of that together and they put lights in it. So all day long, there's flowers and things in there, or whatever you choose. And at night, it lights up.
Wow.
There are monuments that have little squares in them. So if your family is cremated, they can all go in one space. When I was young, cremation was not a big thing, and people got buried. And when you get buried, it takes up space. So when you buy a cemetery plot, you only could put 2 people in the plot. Now you can put 12 because you can put the 2 in that were going in, and then, closer to the top, you can put the ashes of lots of people. Yeah. Some people have their dogs buried with them.
Wow.
Depending on the laws in your area. So it's always, some people buy, if they have money, they buy huge monuments. Some people just buy a short little, actually, you can now get cemetery markers. It used to be Sears sold them. You now can get them from Amazon.
That's, I guess Amazon is the modern equivalent of the Sears catalog, but that is so funny to think of. That you can buy a headstone on Amazon.
You can. You can buy all different kinds. You can just get little tiny ones, and you can get some pretty hefty ones.
For the 250th anniversary that's coming up to July 11th, are you going to bring some history to the parade and the stuff in downtown Ravenna?
Am I going to bring history? Jonathan, on the 4th of July in Edinburg, we're having an ice cream social. That is a traditional ice cream social. We're not having fancy games. It's going to be a simple time for the people of Edinburg to come together and have ice cream and share some times and good times. We are going to make a time capsule to be buried, and in it, we will have people put in letters and pictures and, not great big things. I personally think we need to put a penny in it because this is the end of the penny.
Yeah, I've been seeing signs everywhere, penny shortages. People are like, we don't have any because they're not minting them anymore.
And then, of course, because it's also the semi-sesquicentennial of our country, we have quarters and coins that are to celebrate that. So, that might be something that in a letter you would like someone in 50 years to open. And it could be a letter and it says, "Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm giving you a penny because this was the end of the pennies in my era." Talk about where you lived in the community growing up. I lived on Stroup Road. My family farm had a runway on it because my father was a pilot. Not a typical life, but the runway's right now no longer there.
And what do you know about the history of in Ravenna now from back then?
The difference?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now, as a kid, we didn't always come to Ravenna. We went to Akron because I had relatives there, so we'd always go to my grandparents' house.
Right. And Akron would have been the biggest metropolitan area in that space, I assume, except Cleveland, I guess.
Yeah. Youngstown Alliance. We went to Alliance some too.
Okay, yeah, fair.
But mostly we would go to Akron. Ravenna has a beautiful historic house section. Ravenna had stores and businesses on Main Street. Mm-hmm. I remember going to the Five and Dime. I remember going to Scorman's. I remember purchasing jewelry from Kreinberg's and Piccioni's. There used to be a service merchandise place here, way back in the day. But Ravenna was always a nice, quaint little place. Not a lot of people knew a lot of people in Ravenna. But when you go to Akron, you don't run into people because it's so much bigger. Mm-hmm. But, the school was here, and they had a private parochial school. How many cemeteries do you think Ravenna has, Jonathan?
I don't know. What do you know?
Well, I know they have Maple Grove, and Maple Grove is an exceptional cemetery because cemeteries are normally taken care of by the township or the city they're in. There are 5 cemeteries in the state of Ohio that are their own governments, and Maple Grove is one of those because it's not in the city, but it's not all in the township. So the township and the city fund the cemetery there. I know that I think it's St. Mary's. There's a Catholic cemetery, and there used to be a Tappan cemetery, but they moved all the stones to Maple Grove, and now it's a highway. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to, is that where do we draw the line on respect?
Yeah. Well, to the respect down here now in Ravenna, downtown.
Well, times change, and everything has either got to change or it disappears. But in the state of Ohio, you know, Jonathan, if you died tonight, you could be buried in your backyard, and the law would let you do that.
Legally?
Legally.
Okay.
But what happens when your house gets sold to the next family that comes to have their life in your house? Mm-hmm. Are they going to want you in the backyard?
Probably not.
Probably not, Jonathan. But there were times when people had lots of land. So I know people, and people in Portage County, I mean, we have a lot of farmers. And it was not uncommon for a family to have a family cemetery. And you could bury 15, 20, 30 people there. But if in the course of them numbering and creating cemeteries, that wasn't made a cemetery, the next guy comes in and it's been 200 years. And he looks and those cemetery stones don't always stand up. You know, freeze and thaw, that lifts them and lowers them. You know, they break if they're not sturdy. Some are made out of different materials that don't weather well at all, because cemetery stones can be made out of wood. I mean, you've seen a Western where you just get the wooden cross and it tells your name. And you've seen the military ones that during the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War, it just says unknown.
Yeah.
But there's a way to respect that.
And I think on Memorial Day, there's a parade for the people who have fought in the wars.
Well, that's always something that is, it's something I didn't learn until my nephew died in Iraq. Memorial Day is for the people who died in the service of their country. And people say, oh no, it's veterans. We throw in the veterans, we throw in the police, and we throw in everybody else. No, that's not true.
That's Armistice Day. That's a different...
It is Veterans Day, and it's for people who gave their life. And when you talk about it in a military sense, they call it to the fullest measure for their country. So, you know, my nephew, who was Ben Dillon, was killed in Iraq. And he gave the fullest measure to his country. And that's Memorial Day. Veterans Day is in the fall. You know, let's celebrate every veteran on Veterans Day. But Memorial Day really should be for the guys that they didn't come home. And some of them didn't come home. I know we have Civil War guys that died in prisoner of war camps. And you think about it. In the 1860s, they weren't just going to put your body in a car and drive you to Edinburg, Ohio, or drive you to Maple Grove and Ravenna.
Right.
So some of them, you know, where they died
Alabama,
is
or buried in
where
wherever.
they spent their eternity. And then I have to tell you that people don't think about how special a cemetery is. But Edinburg Cemetery is special to me, Jonathan, because I will be spending my eternity there.
Wow. And my next question is that, well, I know it's a question, how do you know me?
How do I know you?
Yes, he likes to ask every guest.
Oh my gosh.
It's a standard.
First of all, Jonathan, you're a really special person. And I probably noticed you long before you met me, because I spent a lot of years teaching special education. And I have met kids that are really good at what they do, and kids that have disabilities that don't permit them to do that. And you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You are an exceptional guy with, it's a genetic condition.
Yes.
Is it okay to say it? And Down syndrome is something that they're learning tons and tons about. They used to say, oh, when women are too old to have babies, they have kids with Downs. That is no longer true. We now know that it's genetic. And that means your father had part of a gene and your mother had part of a gene, and bingo bango, there's Jonathan. But the first time I noticed you, you came into the library and you were selling tickets for an event downtown in Ravenna. And the person you were selling tickets to, I'm not sure they really wanted you to remember to come sell them the tickets, because their voice sounded a little like, and you said, don't you remember? You told me to come up to work and you would buy a ticket. And they bought a ticket. But that is a credit to your tenacity, and that's a good character trait. Mm-hmm. And you have sold how many tickets?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
And you do it for the Balloonathon. You do it for anything else going on in Ravenna. Jonathan, you're like Ravenna's untapped power by being their number one fan and their biggest spokesperson. Mm-hmm. So you know how the mayor only gets elected for so many years?
Yes.
Jonathan, we have you for life.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we do. And it's a good
And you
term.
love your town, and that's a great thing.
But some people can be negative about that too.
Yes, there are some people who can be negative about that. But you know what I found, Jonathan?
Yeah.
I advocate. So when somebody gets after one of my kids or thinks they shouldn't go to the prom with every other kid, I take them to the prom. Mm-hmm. Because you know what? There is no difference. There is no reason for you not to have a share in life that everybody else gets. But then you got to remember, there are just some people in life that are grumpy. Mm-hmm. You know, there are people who don't like people because they're wearing a blue shirt. Mm-hmm. There are people who don't like people because you have a fancy car and I don't. But you may have been the person that spent 10 years in school getting an incredible job, and you make tons of money, and you bought that car as a reward for your hard work. What about the person who doesn't like you having that car? You know, where are they working? What are they doing? So it's a choice.
Yeah. What can you say to the people what we just talked about right now?
Well, I have a, so I'm going to tie it back in real quick because I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to tie it back in because I think I have a good segue, and then we're actually almost at time here. So, it sounds like what we are talking about, of course, is respect. We've been talking about that pretty much this whole episode. So I am going to then bring it back to cemeteries with my last two questions here. So, first question, speaking of respect, what are you doing, your part, to help keep your cemeteries restored and kept up, and like what actions are you taking, not necessarily personally, but as a group with your group, to keep these things preserved, because we need to respect them?
So my group, and I'm the president of the Edinburg Historical Society, we are restoring the old section of the cemetery, and as a preservationist, that's what I do. So we would be going in and taking the broken stones and using the most modern techniques to preserve them so they look the way they've always looked. Christine Utreyer in this area is raising money to make sure every veteran's grave has a stone. You know, they dedicated their lives to our country, and some of them are in unmarked graves, and that's totally unacceptable. I work in a lot of cemeteries. Believe it or not, Jonathan, I've been to every cemetery in Portage County and some that aren't even on the map. But I teach classes. I talk to people about it. I raise money. I write grants. You know, I live cemeteries. And to tell you, and this may sound even weirder still, The high school I graduated from, we have a Facebook page that's dedicated to all the people who have passed. And I manage that page. And it's great to live a good life. And I know it's all about what you do between the dash. But it seems to me like there's a level of respect that is disappearing, like our cemeteries are disappearing. And that's not what I want to see.
Yeah.
You know, I want kids in the future to remember when your mom used to make you call somebody Mrs. So-and-so and you could never call them by their name?
Yeah.
You know, I grew up that way. And it's changed. And I'm not so sure it's a good change. And I understand respect is earned. But what do you do till you know them? Well, you respect them.
Yeah.
You know, the cops pull you over. You respect them.
Yes.
You know, it's the way it is.
So people respect people in Ravenna for who they are and what they do downtown Ravenna too, right?
Well, I don't want to say it's so much for who they are. I want to say it's more about what they do. You could respect me for being just a woman.
Yeah.
But then when you find out that I go to cemeteries where there are broken stones and stones falling down and stones buried under the ground, you know, that's a lot of hard work. And we respect people who work hard, don't we? Isn't that the American way?
Yes. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have you seen the movie Invictus with Morgan Freeman in it?
Have I seen the movie Invictus?
The South African soccer team, when Morgan Freeman plays Nelson Mandela.
I have not.
Well, there's this when
But I know Morgan Freeman.
See, Morgan Freeman, it was about a soccer game
Yeah.
to Matt Damon, and Morgan Freeman, as Nelson Mandela did say that, how do we define the country? You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Damon, who portrayed that soccer person, because I think Matt Damon, on his part, says to his wife, I think that Nelson Mandela, as Morgan Freeman, wants us to win the World Cup. What do you think about that?
Do you hear the silence? Jonathan, I know a lot about baseball and a little bit about basketball, but for the other sports, no. I don't have a TV at my house. I read books, and I'm not so sure. I mean, I know what a soccer ball is, but I don't think I've ever even, maybe little kids soccer. I don't think I've ever been to a soccer match.
I'm just trying to hear about that scene in the movie.
Oh, what do I
Yeah.
think about it?
Like Nelson Mandela basically is asking Matt Damon, because at the quick explainer, because I remember the history and I haven't seen the movie in a while. When Nelson Mandela won the election, obviously South African apartheid had just ended, and white and black people were really confused. And Matt Damon plays a white soccer player, obviously Nelson Mandela being their new black president. Basically, it was known that the black folk in South Africa would say, well, we aren't going to root for the national team because why would I root for the people oppressing me? But Nelson Mandela basically says, like, I'm the president now. I want you to win. I'm rooting for my boys, basically. He's trying to pull the country together through this soccer as like a metaphor. So I think what Jonathan's asking is when Nelson Mandela basically says to Matt Damon, I want you to win the World Cup, I want you to show we're united. And I think he's talking about how what we're talking about in that respect in the country that's lost. It's Nelson Mandela's way of saying we need to start respecting each other. And we're going to do that through this game. So...
Well, and that's kind of where I'm at with cemeteries, Jonathan. If we get the word out and people learn how to take care of, if we get the word out and people understand that there are black cemeteries, that's got to stop. I'm sorry, we're all human beings. Does it matter? And I am probably the worst about it. As a special ed teacher, I don't care if you're green. I don't care if you walk. I don't care if you crawl. When you walk into my classroom, you're a human being, and you will be treated as such. I mean, does that mean I don't hold a line? I do. There are boundaries, and everybody needs to respect boundaries. Even in Ravenna, we have boundaries. Mm-hmm. You don't walk down the center of the road. Why is that? because they tell you somebody will run over and kill you.
Yeah.
But it's time. It's time for us to just be human beings, and we have to all. Now, let me tell you about a movie.
Okay.
Do you remember the scene in? Oh my gosh, I can't remember the movie. The one with the fish.
Finding Nemo?
Finding Nemo.
Okay, yeah.
Where they try to get everybody to pull in the same direction.
Yeah.
We need a whole lot more of pulling in the same direction. So in Ravenna, we all believe pretty much in the same things. There are some things that we don't talk about, but don't we want a nice place to live?
Yes, we do.
Well, then, to me, we all need to get together and pull in the same direction. Does it matter if we're one political party or one faith or one color? No, because that's a small part of who we are. The biggest part of who we are is us right here, right now, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You know, we don't treat each other differently, and we're all pulling in the same direction. And I think that's the message that you and I send every day, and I know Will does too.
So, Will, what do you think about that?
Well, so that leads me to my last question, and then we'll wrap up the interview. Therefore, what can we do as a society? Because obviously, those of us outside, how can we support you specifically in your efforts to preserve these cemeteries, to preserve these memories, to preserve these people's very essence, really? You know, it is their remains. Like, what can we do? What can we as a people do?
Can I add in that?
Yeah.
How can we get people involved? To your question, and what's Beverly's answer to this?
Well, we have people involved because most families go and decorate their loved ones' graves. What we have now is because of America 250, there was a big push to go out and clean all the stones for veterans. But everything needs to come with a little bit of education. You know, when I first started preserving stones, we cleaned them with vinegar because it was acetic acid. Now we would no more clean a stone with vinegar than anything. And sometimes it's hard for things to change, and people don't know the proper ways. So that's why I get out and teach workshops as often as I'm invited to tell people, hey, you know, we're going to clean it this way. You don't have to buy a fancy chemical cleaner. You know, a neutral soap and water and a soft scrub brush, that's still pretty good. You're going to have to do it more often than treating it. And you know, Jonathan, with pollution nowadays, we have things growing on cemetery stones I've never seen before. Moss, lichen. You know, people come to the cemetery to decorate and they plant trees. Well, trees are okay, but how big is that tree going to be in 200 years? So, you know, here's a tree that literally has grown right over and swallowed up somebody's marker.
Not to mention the root system, like through the actual burial
Through the
site.
cemetery and stuff. So I think the answer is education. People do come. It's kind of a private thing. And it's not uncommon when I'm in cemeteries, and I'm there a lot, to see a little old man come in a car, and he gets out and he has a bucket and he goes over to this stone, and I don't need to go look. I'm going to say that's probably his wife. And he sweeps it off with a whisk broom and squirts stuff on it and cleans it. And that's what we need more of.
I see.
You
Just
know, we
that
need to
respect.
take care of our cemeteries.
Yeah.
And what else do we need in downtown Ravenna
You know what?
that you can think of?
I think we need, I mean, we have Guido's. It would have to be a restaurant you can go in and sit down and act like an adult in.
And what about the pocket park beside Guido's?
Oh,
The
parking
parking
lot.
place beside Guido's, that's really nice. Honestly, I kind of thought Guido's was expanding. And they didn't. And I was truly disappointed because, you know, when I come to town, I go to eat at Guido's. And sometimes the wait is getting long because now that the word is out, lots of people are coming to Guido's.
Yeah.
All right.
Can
You
I
got
do
one last one?
thing?
Yeah, you got one last one? Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna see this together. Okay.
Okay.
About Wake up Ravenna.
Oh, okay, let me do the outro and we'll do it together. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. Well then, so thank you very much, Beverly, for talking with us. That was an invigorating conversation. And I mean, I'm a historically minded person. I knew nothing about cemetery preservation, and that is a fantastic thing. Where, if people do want to get involved, and with your historical society or the cemeteries at all, like where can they find that?
My involvement with the cemeteries right now, we have 2 Facebook pages. One is the Portage County Infirmary page, and the other one is the Edinburg, Ohio History page. I also can be reached through the Edinburg, Ohio Historical Society.
Okay. All right.
And please reach out. We're always looking for people who want to know more, learn more.
All right. Well, so with that then, my name is Will Hollingsworth, and I am with...
Jonathan Floyd.
whom we have just interviewed.
Beverly Nissel.
And this has been...
Wake up, Ravenna!
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. You've been listening to Wake Up Ravenna. Our program is hosted by Jonathan Floyd and Will Hollingsworth. Technical production and recording took place at the Reed Memorial Public Library Makerspace. Support for this podcast comes from the library's programming department and the residents of Ravenna. Support local books, support your local library, and we'll see you next time.